Delighted to be joined by Brian Hughes. Brian, thanks for taking the time out to join myself and Fran on our customary Friday night Zoom call. And firstly, many congratulations on being the first Northern-based jump jockey to be champion jockey since John Joe O'Neill back 40 years ago. That must give you some serious sense of pride and achievement.
Yeah, it's great to join you, Kevin. Look, it's a pleasure, really. Look, it was brilliant. Obviously, it's not something everyone dreams of being champion jockey at some point of their career, but it's you don't want to let yourself believe that it's quite possible, because the disappointment of not getting there is probably greater. But yeah, look, it was big sense of achievement. Or I'm proud now looking back when you have the trophy and you look at the legendary names that have won it. Like, not for a second now do I think I'm a legend in any sense of the word, but the people who've won it all down the years, it's something I'm proud of anyways.
And Brian, to be based up the north of England as well, and obviously when John Joe was champion jockey back in the 80s, the north of England was a real powerhouse of jump racing, the likes of Gordon Richards, Arthur Stevenson, Jimmy Fitzgerald, so on and so forth. But the emphasis is really turned around now, hasn't it? And obviously it's more predominantly flat up the north now. Yeah,
you're right. Even since I've come over here 15 years ago, Kevin, the north, as you said, years ago there was the powerhouse of the north, the Easterbees and the likes, and but even since I've come over, there's no more Howard Johnson, no Ferdy Murphy, Len Lunglow. You know what I mean? There's a lot of big yards that aren't there anymore, and it seems to be predominantly southern based now. So, but there's still plenty of trainers, and they're just smaller yards. But I'm very lucky that I've the pick of quite a lot of them.
And obviously, predominantly your stable jockey, Donald McCain, and of course Nicky Richards as well. And you ride for such a wide variety of small, medium-sized and bigger type trainers as well up the north.
Yeah, as you say, obviously I ride, mainly for Donald and Nicky, and there's still Brian Ellison and James Ewart, and there's plenty of people that support me, as you say, varying different sizes of yards. And I'm lucky enough that I do get the pick of and if a good spare comes up, normally my name's normally in the hat, so I'm quite fortunate in that respect.
And Brian, do you think jump racing is starting to get going again up the north of England?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, look, as you said, it's predominantly flat. There's a big flat contingent up around the north of England and Malton and Midland. But yeah, I do think that there is starting to slowly, yards are starting to increase again. And obviously, look, at the minute, lockdown's not exactly a help to any of the trainers or the owners or anything, but I suppose you have to be optimistic, and you hope that it's sort of gaining a bit of ground again.
And did you ever think you could be champion jockey? I know you're a very driven individual, but did you ever think you could be champion jockey based primarily and solely up the north of England?
Honestly, probably not, Kevin. Obviously you always hope and you dream that that's the case, but the 3 or 4 years before, I was doing as well as I could, and I was a long way off the mark, and I'd always get sort of left behind a bit sort of through the summer, and then I'd make late gains, and obviously I was sort of consistently riding 140 plus winners, but the last season, obviously I was able to keep tabs on the leaders over during the summer, and then obviously myself and Dickie were neck and neck for a while until he got injured. But look, it's obviously, I was obviously heading for, if I stayed in one piece, my best season numbers wise. But yeah, look, it's not something you dream, as you said, to be champion jockey, but I was struggling to let myself believe it, because I didn't want to get disappointment of it either.
And Brian, from as soon as the season got underway last year, in the just at the end of spring and the beginning of summer, May, June time, you just got on a roll, and it was continuous. Had you ridden 100 winners by last Christmas, for your second consecutive Christmas, you'd hit the 100 target?
Yeah, well, that's obviously always the target every year, is to get to the 100 mark. But the last 2 seasons, and mainly last season, I had a good steady flow of winners throughout, and yourself, Kevin, when you're riding winners, they just seem to come because you're more and more fashionable, and you seem to get on the better types of horses, and confidence is high in that. But yeah, look, it was that's where I sort of felt I'd gained a bit. I'd been able to ride a good steady flow of winners throughout the whole season.
And Brian, obviously momentum started to gather. The media really got behind it as well. It was brilliant to watch, and it was a great story all the way through. You obviously built up a good lead over Dickie Johnson. He was closing in you, but I still think am I right saying you were still 20 in front of him or near enough to it when Dickie obviously fractured his arm in the early part of this year?
Yeah, well, obviously, yeah, we were, as you said, the momentum was building. And I mean, I always kept it at the back of my mind till we got into the new year. And then obviously, myself and Dickie, in the first couple of weeks of January, obviously, we'd be riding at the similar meetings. And I just took the lead, I think. And then he got the injury. And then I was obviously rolling away, and I think I managed to ride 20 winners before he got back. But then obviously we missed a couple of weeks with bad weather and one thing and another. And obviously he the first couple of weeks he was back, he was making inroads. But I just had to keep my head down and just had to ride the same amount of winners as him. And then it was physically impossible for him to inroad, get into the gap really. But anyway, we managed to do it. And I'd say both of us still had plenty of ammunition for the rest of the season. The last 6 weeks rather, when obviously racing was stopped.
And obviously then you had the big meetings like Dickie, but obviously you had Ayr coming up, the Scottish Grand National meeting. You had obviously Aintree as well. You've ridden plenty of winners at Aintree, the Grand National meeting. There was plenty of big meetings coming up in the north of England. Yeah,
well, that's what I say. Like obviously Donald and Nicky were gearing up for Aintree and Ayr, because that's obviously where they obviously aim their better horses, and we had plenty of nice horses that we thought would be good and competitive at both meetings. So obviously it was frustrating when it didn't happen, but we had still, like both my biggest yards had still plenty of firepower to they were waiting on the better ground, and and obviously in a festival at Perth and places like that. So there was going to be a good end to the season anyways.
And Brian, coming to say the end of February, start of March, did you then start to realise, well, I have a massive chance of being crowned champion jockey? Did it bring added pressure to you? Did you start to feel it basically?
Obviously, yeah, it started to dawn on you that that it could actually be possible. But being truthful, Kevin, obviously, like I like going back even 20 years ago, I've always had good people around me and take good advice from them. And I mean, I could only control what I was doing, and my agent just said, just keep doing what you've been doing, and you can only control what you do. And that's all I did. And look, obviously, you try not to look over your shoulder or watch what Richard Johnson was doing, because I just had to worry about myself and just keep doing the things I was doing like I had been all season. And as I say, then obviously you just need to look to stay in one piece.
Surely though, Brian, if you had a blank day, you're looking at the phone on the way home, how many winners did Dickie Johnson ride? You wouldn't be human if you didn't do that.
Oh, absolutely, Kevin. And that's just the nature of this game. You're looking and seeing what the other fella's done and one thing and another. But, you just got to keep your head down. And that's probably, as you will know, most jockeys, it's all on the mental side of things. You've got to just, like, when things aren't going well, you've just got to keep doing the same thing and not try too hard, and just keep riding horses as you would have in normal circumstances. And you hope that it if say you have a couple of bad days or 2 days, that you hope it turns around quite quickly.
And Fran, obviously you can relate exactly to what Brian went through, because you would have been champion jockey back in Ireland. You were well clear when you had that horrific injury. What was it? There was only 7 or 8 of you in a mile maiden in the Curragh. The last place you'd expect something like that to happen in such a small field, and both yourself and Mick Canaan both suffered injuries, and that put paid to your championship season.
Yeah, indeed, Kevin. And that's the thing, isn't it? You're clear and then you're hoping you don't get injured, but you're always looking behind you, aren't you? That's the thing I found. You're constantly looking, what's he riding? What's he doing? I used to take on you and Pat, Pat Smullen and yourself and my agent Kieran O'Toole, and, you're trying to think each other, and it can really get quite intense, Brian, can't it? And you just got to block out all of that stuff once you get on the track, though, I found. Anyway, once you're on the horse, you just got to make the most of each ride then from then on. But it's an intense time, and it kind of takes over everything.
Oh, absolutely, Fran. Yeah, I agree with you. Like you just live and breathe it. But as you say, I mean, you've got to put all that stuff behind you when you get on the horse, and because I mean, the horse doesn't know you're fighting for a championship, and you know yourself. If you're trying to make things, force things in a race, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the wrong thing. And if you're not going out into a race with a cool head, and you know you'll make the wrong call, or you won't sit when you should be sitting, or you'll be asking the horse for his effort too soon. And as you say, yeah, look, it obviously comes with more experience you get, but you obviously look over your shoulder, but you try and keep doing the same things you've always done when you get on the horse's back.
Indeed. And Brian, obviously things are going great. COVID intervened, ended Cheltenham week. Was it a state of limbo that am I champion, or are we going to be back racing, or how did you deal with that shutdown? I suppose like anybody else at the time, it's strange.
It was very strange. Like, I mean, obviously, one day we were racing, and then was going to Weatherby, and we got a call, oh, this is the last day's racing. Season's finished. And I'm thinking, well, surely, you know, you're thinking, then there was a rumour, oh, the season might be void and all this sort of thing. And then you're thinking, that would be about typical, wouldn't it? You know, look, it's just, it was annoying from my point of view that the season was stopped, and everyone, other jockeys and trainers and owners and when horses were there to run. But I suppose then, obviously, the reality had to set in, and you're looking at the news, and there's a lot of people losing their lives. And then, you know, you've got to think, well, probably fortunate enough and luckily enough, no one that I know that got COVID, or you know, actually died from COVID. So it's I suppose you got to be thankful for that as well.
Indeed. And Brian, just obviously when it was confirmed, we seen you getting presented with a trophy at home and everything. It must be, I know it wasn't a walkout at Sandown that you're hoping for the last day of the season, but still to get that trophy into your hands must have been something else.
Oh, it was brilliant. I mean, like, that's probably when the first moment you hit it, and you're looking at the names that people have won it over the last however many years, and you think, wow, my name's on there too, you know. And it's just, you don't obviously believe you're as good as them other jockeys, but you're thinking, well, if I don't achieve anything else, it's there, and it can't be taken off. But yeah, look, obviously didn't get the Sandown day, but as Kevin will probably agree with me, I wouldn't be one for the big smoke. The quieter day I got at home would probably suited me fine now.
Brian, 3 Cheltenham winners on the board already. Is that something you obviously want to add to? Would that be the next step? You want to ride more Cheltenham winners?
Yeah, it would be, Kevin. Obviously, look, they're hard to. It's a hard place to compete. You know, everyone wants Cheltenham winners. I've only had 3 of them, as you say. But obviously, to win the grade races down there is obviously what every jockey aspires to. I'd love to be going down there with horses with chances in them. I mean, I've been placed in a few of them, but yeah, sure, it's obviously the dream, and hopefully, you never know, one day you stumble across a horse that's good enough to be winning them races.
Yeah, good stuff. But the main aim, Brian, is to retain that championship crown this season.
Yeah. I mean, the trophy's in the other room there, Kevin. I don't want to let it go just yet, so we'll have to keep our head down, and hopefully we can keep a hold of it anyways.
Just want to go back to the start. First time I got to know you, you're an apprentice with Kevin Prendergast before you went over to England. And prior to that, you were with Jimmy Lamb. Can you just tell us how you got into the game and got started? Obviously, you're born up in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, well, obviously, between the common denominator of most young lads getting into racing, school was never very interesting for them. And I was no different. And the careers teacher got me a brochure on race, the apprentice school in the Curragh. And once I knew that existed, that was the path I was going. Obviously, I was interested in racing and wanted to be a jockey, but then you just didn't know how to go about it. And yeah, I went to race, and that was good. Learned plenty there. But then I suppose I got properly educated then when I got sent to Kevin Prendergast, because I mean, like good old-fashioned yard with good values, old-fashioned values, and you know, I didn't probably appreciate it at the time but when you stand back, you realize how good a trainer Kevin actually still is, you know. But yeah, it started off in the Curragh, and then and I've been lucky. Then I was always had the right people around me, Fran, you know, just to help you in good jockeys were there, and you learned plenty from them, you know.
What was one of the key things you learned? Sorry, Fran.
No, go on, Kev. Go on.
What was one of the key attributes to Kevin Prendergast? Why is he such a good trainer, both of horses and of jockeys, right?
I suppose he probably instills a good work ethic in the young lads, and I mean, he said to me very early on, you know, you get out of this game what you put into it, and like apprentices were like apprentices, as in you worked hard, but he was very fair. I mean, I wasn't the best apprentice he had that at the time we were there. There was some good lads, and but like when they all put their head down and worked, they got their rewards. I mean, obviously myself and Chris Gagan, we signed on the same day, and I mean, Chris was a better apprentice than me. There's no two ways about it. But again, like, we still got our chances the same as any other lads in the yard when you worked hard. And look, it was hard at the time. I mean, you know, you rode out every day, even on your Sunday off. If you wanted rides, you just had to put your head down and work. And it sets you up then for the rest of your life, because then you know, well, if I work hard, I'll achieve X, Y, you know what I mean? So, but Kevin was different. I mean, like, even like he'd see if you know things weren't going well. Suddenly, like, I broke my arm in my second season, and come back, and I was struggling away. And then he actually took Chris off a filly, Miss Trish, in the Galway Festival, and let me ride her. And I was a 10-pound claimer, and like, it just propelled you back into like people's minds again. You know, like she was a great filly. Like, I mean, I gave her the worst ride you've ever seen. Pat Shanahan probably wanted to kill me after the race, and probably Fran as well. Pat panicking, the young lad, and just got you know, typical Galway, drawn on the inside, and nothing was happening right. And the filly was that good, she got us out of trouble. And you know, like, you think you're a hero. Well, everyone else thinks you're a hero, and you look like thinking, I got away with that one. But you know, that was what Kevin did. Like, he would put you on a filly or a horse that, you know, would just throw you back into people's minds. And then I got plenty of rides off the back of that season, you know. Kevin Prendergast always knew that I was going to end up over jumps, and he actually got me my conditional license when I was in my second year, and just rode the odd one, because he did used to have a few jumpers.
And the initial stage in Howard's, what was it like going from Kevin Prendergast yard in the Curragh to Howard Johnson's up the north of England?
Not going to lie now, Kevin, it was chalk and cheese now, to be honest. I mean, obviously, you know, like, obviously two different types of trainers. You know, obviously, Kevin Prendergast was, you know, I could probably still tell you now what to do every day, because it's such a good system. And Howard's obviously, it was obviously into a jump yard, and Howard is quirky, to say the least. So, you know, we did a few things that, you know, obviously was an eye-opener, but it seemed to work at the time. So.
And obviously it was just the beginning, really. I think the infancy, really, of Howard's dominance up the north of England. Obviously, Graham and Andrea Wiley, the investment they put into the yard as well. You had a lot of top-class horses there. English Dreamer, Tidal Bay, who you latterly, in a couple of years later, won definitely once, if not twice. But it was now becoming the big powerhouse that it was up the north.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, the year after I'd started, they had the three winners at Cheltenham. Obviously, it was English Dreamer, Arcalis, and No Refuge had won all at the festival. And I mean, the end of every flat season, the quality of horses that there was coming from the sales was like, you know, horses that were placed in derbies and in an arc, and, you know, the quality of these flat horses. I mean, obviously now they're all going out foreign, but you were sitting on horses that were 110, 115, you know, to go jumping. Like, it was just getting it out of one Range Rover into another. That's what they felt like. You know, the Graham and Andrea Wiley obviously, you know, did spend plenty of money buying these nice horses, and yeah, it was. I mean, was an eye opener, you know, because you'd never seen such quality animals, you know, to go jumping.
And Brian, obviously you got things started to get going, but you went through a little bit of a lull, and after a couple of seasons, then you decided to leave Howard and go freelancing. But as you went freelancing, you still kept that connection with Howard.
Yeah, well, as I say, look, when I first went there, obviously, you know, Graham Lee would have been stable jockey, and Graham would have been off down south on a weekend riding the good horses in the big races, and I was lucky enough that I was getting on, you know, horses that were run up north, and lucky enough they were winning for me. And then obviously Graham went to Ferdy's the next season after that, and Paddy Brennan would have come up to be first jockey, and again he was right. He got the bulk of the rides. I got a few rides, but the quality wasn't there, and you know, didn't really take the natural progression to step forward. I rode a lot less winners the next year, and so I thought, well, I had to change something to, you know, I wanted to, obviously I was hungry and I wanted to be riding more winners, so I decided to go freelance, and through Howard's wife, her father, late father, Ray Hawkey, he got me in with plenty of trainers. John Wade, Alan Swinbank, you know, obviously, and then your father got me riding for Richard Fahey, and, you know, good flat horses going jumping, and through them 3 yards, I managed to be champion conditional the next year, and then it just started, the balls just started rolling, and I got, every year you just try to ride more and more winners, and, you know, try and get more and more contacts, and it's just sort of rolled away from there, really.
Obviously, when Howard gave up training and that, you started riding for Malcolm Jefferson. Started getting a few rides off Malcolm, and next thing you ended up stable jockey, and you were right with Malcolm up until sadly the end. But Malcolm, he was a great trainer, and he was a real old-fashioned trainer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. It was very funny how I actually got riding from. Obviously, obviously, it was Howard's, and I rode for James Ewart for a season, and then I just got a spare ride from Malcolm one day at Weatherby. Danny Cook was meant to ride a horse called Makeda, and he was a bit of a brave jumper, and I think he'd fallen on his first start over fences, and not jumped very well on his second start, and Danny Cook got injured, and he was meant to ride him, and then I just seen the colours on my peg, and that was my first ride for Malcolm, really. And he went and won, and then he won a couple, and then slowly just got a few more rides from him, and then the next season I was basically riding them all. And Malcolm was a great trainer, obviously a little bit like Kevin Prendergast in the fact that, you know, bought a real lovely stamp of a horse, and you know, might not be the best pedigree in the world, but a real correct, good moving horse, and you know, he seemed to just bring them on and you know, get good results. And again, for the few seasons we were together, you know, Malcolm's yard was growing and growing, and when we had success, we had, you know, more people coming and more horses, you know, it was going great. And then sadly Malcolm got cancer, and then, you know, it was unfortunate, and then, you know, it was awfully sad when he passed away, because I mean, he'd sort of got a team of good horses together, and obviously Waiting Patient, he was just out of his novice season, and you know, obviously we had high hopes for him, and it was Cloudy Dream, Cyrus Darius, you know, horses that were, you know, going and being competitive in the big meetings and graded races, and that's kind of what every yard aspires to have, you know.
I was always interested when you teamed up with Donald McCain. Obviously, you've had a great association the last couple of seasons, but his style of riding horses wouldn't necessarily be your ideal style of riding horse. Would that be fair to say?
That'd be a very fair comment. Fran, look, obviously Donald's a great trainer, and training Grand National winners, and you know, he is the biggest yard in the north, and yeah, look, obviously I suppose I've had to slightly adapt things, how obviously different trainers want their horses ridden differently, and obviously Donald has probably had to adapt slightly to my style a bit, but I think we work well together. Obviously I get what he wants, and he sort of sees how I ride, and you know, I suppose there's a few times now if there was one that he thought that probably wouldn't be best suited to me, we'd let one of the other lads have a go, because obviously, you know, but that's fine. And look, Donald got a good team of horses now, and we've got obviously Mr. and Mrs. Leslie have invested a lot of money and got some nice young horses, and a lot of the other owners as well. So yeah, look, it's working well at the minute.
Obviously during the summer as well, you when the jumping yard's quieting down, you ride out a lot for your good friend Kevin Ryan as well, and Richard Fahey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as I say, I've obviously through your father, I've been introduced to Richard Fahey and Robin Ryan, and then obviously latterly, because Kevin's my closest trainer, I've become very good friends with Kevin, and yeah, look, it's great. Obviously, I have a good. Obviously, with starting out in the flat, I still retain plenty of interest in flat racing, and Kevin spoils me a bit now. He lets me ride the nice horses, the group horses, and I get a feel of a good horse on the flat. You know, it's a little bit different maybe than a jumper, but no, look, it's just something I've always done, Kevin, and yeah, I've good interest in it, and you know.
And Richard and Kevin, I can't remember which one of them gave you the nickname, but you're to Kevin and Richard, you're basically known as Shiny Shoes. Tell us how that came about.
Yeah, obviously when I started going to ride out in Richards, I again from going back to Kevin Prendergast's, I was always told appearance is everything, and when the boots were polished and shiny, that's how Richard said. He still calls me Shiny to this day. Brian Hughes with the shiny shoes. That's all I ever got taught. That's how he would talk at me. Yeah, look, it was great. Obviously, like, I mean, I've been lucky enough to be involved with Richard since I've come over, and I mean, you can see how his yard's evolved and done brilliantly. But a brilliant trainer, but an even nicer human being. Him, Kevin, and Robin. You know.
And Niall Hannity's keeping well. Our colleague from Racing TV seems to run the north of England. Well, so he tells us, Ran, isn't it?
Well, so we'd be lost without him, wouldn't we? Yeah, look, he's Niall's keeping well. Yeah, I see him most days at the meetings in the north when he's on the TV, as you say. But
is he always eating pies and chips and everything?
I couldn't divulge that sort of information now, you know.
Well, he's always telling myself and Fran that he's out cycling with Keith Dalgleish and with the Lycra, and he's out running. We find it very hard to believe because it doesn't look, the evidence isn't quite visual, is it, Fran?
Maybe it's the screen or the camera, but he definitely isn't losing weight anyway.
They say the camera adds 10 pounds, don't they?
Well, definitely in Hannity's case that is true. And Brian, one of your key attributes is your work ethic, and obviously that was instilled in you from an early age when you're in Kevin Prendergast as well. But as everybody says, if there was 8 days in the week, Brian Hughes would find somewhere to ride out in the 8th day.
Well, yeah, look, at the end of the day, Kevin, it's been instilled in me since I was an apprentice, and I always said to myself, if I didn't achieve what I wanted to by the time I retired, well, then I could say, well, I didn't do it. I didn't achieve it because I didn't put enough effort in, or I didn't I try to give myself every chance to be successful. So if I didn't achieve it, then I can just say, well, I wasn't good enough, you know. But I always had that attitude because, again, from being around the right people when I was younger, they instilled that in you, and then you know, then it's true. No one else's fault but your own. If you don't put the work in, you're not going to get it out, you know.